Hi, I'm Marc Randolph, co-founder of Netflix and 6 other companies. Over the years, I've heard that will never work thousands of times, but I've learned there are things we all can do to increase the chances that they will. So join me for That Will Never Work. Hey everybody, and welcome to That Will Never Work. If you want to find out more or apply to be a guest, simply come to marcrandolph.com. You'll also find a way to receive an invite to our That Will Never Work Discord community. The pandemic kept kids out of school and separated families. It was an issue that affected this week's guest, Kyle Walgren, personally. He missed being able to read to his child in Canada when he was trapped across the border in Texas. The answer? The Edsoma app, which would allow him to read to his child virtually every night. It's attracted a bunch of initial attention. Shaquile O'Neill has even agreed to join his advisory board. But investors were not quite so enthusiastic. Why is Kyle having so much trouble putting the cash in the bank? Is it his approach to fundraising or something more fundamental? Well, let's find out. Welcome, Kyle, to That Will Never Work.
Hey, Marc, how are you?
I'm well, thank you. I'm kind of eager to chat with you. I mean, I think a lot of people face certain circumstances during COVID. It turned out to be, I think, the birth of many businesses. And it sounds like yours might be one of them. So what I'd love to do is have you kind of start me off by giving us a quick overview of what you've been working on. And then maybe we can kind of naturally segue into how I can help.
Yeah, for sure. So during COVID, like you said, a lot of problems arose that we had never faced before. Mine was firsthand. I was born in Canada. I have 2 children in Canada, and I was separated through COVID with the border lockdowns. So I found myself having to engage with my children over video streaming. When it became apparent that we weren't going back to school, I realized that me teaching my kids was going to be something that was very much my reality. And with me doing it over, Zoom or FaceTime, it wasn't going as well as I planned. When I was trying to teach my children to really read, I realized how poor I was at reading. And then when I started looking into the statistics around reading, in America alone, there's over 54 million American adults that can't read the basic menu at a restaurant. So that started to concern me because the majority of those people were probably the families that wouldn't be able to afford tutoring for their children during the COVID lockdowns, and that I felt like we were just going to create a larger literacy gap in America, focused on America, but ultimately the entire world was going to be challenged with the same problems. So I created a video streaming platform that uses voice identification to identify weaknesses in the reader. So whether it's a parent or the child, we can identify where the child's weak at, create or provide content for them around those needed areas, but we can do that all in real time. So one of the really neat things that have happened over the last little bit, or not neat, one of the things that have happened in our favor is that the government's made it law in 37 states that you will not be able to pass the 3rd grade without being able to read at a 3rd grade reading level. And typically what they did was standardized testing at the beginning of the year and at the end of the year to make sure that those kids were on track. To our knowledge, we are the only product that can do oral readability tests in real time and provide a Lexile measure while reading every piece of content that they read on our platform, while sharing that content with their class or with other family members.
So is reading out loud a different skill than reading?
Yes, it is. It very much is, but it does a couple of things that without even knowing. It's something that helps build self-confidence in a person. Reading out loud does so many things, like in a public environment. So you get to hear yourself enunciate the words. Reading out loud is a way for us to track it. Obviously, before there was comprehension testing to make sure that what you read silently was being understood properly. But with oral readability, we can actually identify the pronunciation, the comprehension, and all that stuff through the oral readability testing.
Yeah, it's actually really interesting because it never occurred to me before that When you read silently, which I guess is 99.99% of reading, the only way to really test whether you are reading is a comprehension test, uh, which doesn't really tell you where you're falling short, whether it's a vocabulary issue, whether it's a grammar issue, whether it's just being able to form the words issue. It's also kind of interesting because you're right. I mean, certainly now, it's the ability for computer speech recognition has become so common and so good. Um, we all take that for granted, but of course now your phone, your computer can recognize exactly what you're saying. So it seems like it's not a huge technological leap to match up what it is someone is saying out loud with the words they're being asked to read. Is that the basic premise of
Yeah,
how
for
this
sure.
works?
It's kind of like the perfect storm right now. I'm sure everybody's noticed, like, oh, I'm looking for, some staples, and all of a sudden their next Amazon thing's telling them they need some staples. So obviously the technology is there to pick up on audio while you're doing things. Where we were challenged was picking up on children's enunciation and stuff like that. That's where the major difference is in what we're doing. So we had to stack multiple speech engines on the top of each other to make sure that we were picking up with the accuracy needed to be a literacy tool. I'm sure people have spoken to their phones and they've heard, mispronunciations or whatever, or the word will be written wrong, but we need to be over 98% with our speech engine to actually be considered a literacy tool of value. So we've had to stack a few speech engines together, which the technology is now where it needs to be for this to happen. You would have thought it would have been available forever ago, but it's just that perfect storm. With COVID hitting, we realized that there was a problem, and then the technology being there is there now.
So this is certainly, listen, I'm probably more familiar with this than you know for a really bizarre reason. I'm just about to head to Europe. I'm going to be spending some time in Italy. I lived in Italy for a while, so I would consider myself conversant in Italian, or
Oh,
I should
really?
have used the past tense. I was conversant in Italian. It was, more than 10 some odd years ago, and boy, has that gone away. This is a long way of telling you that I'm now using Duolingo, little plug there, um, and which is really cool because it does use speech recognition to measure my ability to read. Because basically, if you do nothing but speak, it's limiting. So it teaches you to write and to read and to read.
Right.
So the reading test is it puts words on the screen and says, read these. And then, of course, it has comprehension. So
Right.
it's really amazing to me how good it is, especially the fact that it can tell how well I'm reading in Italian, which, believe me, is definitely challenging. They probably had to stack 8 or 9 different speech engines
I'm
to
sure of it.
recognize my Italian pronunciation. Nonetheless, I get it. But tell me about the things you may have had to build. You can certainly tell when someone does it wrong, but what are you doing to try and have somebody get it right?
So one of the partnerships that we entered into early on was with Metametrics. It's a Lexile scoring system. They've been around since early 80s, I believe, and they've become the industry standard in measurement in reading. So we went with probably the most trusted brand in reading in the school districts to make sure that we were presenting it properly. But as you read out loud, it'll identify the words and it'll highlight them for that instant gratification, right? It turns green as you read them. And then if you start to struggle, it'll break the words down into syllables. If you continue to struggle, you can select the word, it'll enunciate it, and then it'll take that word structure and put it into a work bucket. And then our back end of our software will provide content based around that word structure. And then we're able to give a Lexile score and an oral readability score as soon as the content's done. So we can, what we like to consider ourselves is a bridge for teachers to come back in and see where they need to help their students out. We don't want to go in and replace teachers. That's not our goal, but we know that they're stretched out to their limits, having to try and teach, and they don't, sadly make near enough for it. But we want to be a tool that they can lean on to say, hey, little Billy is having these challenges, and I know that coming into reading class today, so we can focus on those areas to get them back up to speed.
Oh boy, I'm getting a sinking feeling about something, but I'll hold that in reserve for a little bit later. So this sounds great. It sounds like a product which you're pretty far along the path of having it work. It certainly sounds like there's a need, and in fact, even cooler, there's a mandated need. So what's the problem? What can I help you with?
The problem is probably one that I think a lot of founders meet. And I've got to watch some of your podcasts, so I know you have the answer for this. But you know,
I appreciate your vote of confidence.
we're a company that I bootstrapped from the beginning. We've been in operations for almost 2 years now. We have 19 employees, so I'm sure you understand the financial investment that it's taken between myself and my partner to get to this time. But now we're looking to raise money. Um, I've always thought that building a team would get us that money needed to raise, but now everybody that says, oh, they invest pre-seed businesses want to see some sort of revenue. For a company like us that can't request revenue until we're 100% perfect because of what we do, how can we go about raising money as a pre-revenue company if that's all investors seem to want?
What an astounding hubris of an investor to actually expect that you can make money at this. I mean, don't they realize how good this is for society?
Yeah, no doubt. That's what we did. We actually brought Shaquile O'Neill on as a marketing partner, and when we showed it to him, he got it, but I can't seem to get investors to get it.
Well, the real question is the get it part and how you define get it. So now I certainly get it in terms of the problem it solves for some kid who's sitting there learning how to read, or one of the 54 million adults who can't read a menu. I get that part, but that's not necessarily what the responsibility, what your responsibility is to an investor. What they have to get is that if they put money into it, they're going to get their money back. And in fact, as I've often said, they're going to get their money back times 10 or times 100. That's what they have to get. And there's two ways to have them get this. And this will be your listening quiz. So listen carefully and choose the correct answer. A, wave your hands around saying how incredible this product is and how it's going to help lots of people, and we'll figure out how to make money later. Or answer B, no, we've actually demonstrated that this is so much in demand that even in an imperfect version, which is only 94% accurate, we've demonstrated that we can sell this and make money on it. Or answer C, we have to be at 98%, but we already have commitments from 17 school districts that they will purchase a full site-wide license for this once we have it done. So is the answer A, B, or C?
So those are all awesome. They're all awesome. And we've done C. We've done C. I've got 28 school districts willing to do paid pilots. We've got a reading fluency company with 10,000 students willing to do paid pilots for us. But for some reason, we're showing the LOIs from these institutions or programs, and that's not enough for the investors. They're like, real revenue is in the bank, and this is revenue on paper. So I'm going with answer C because that's the direction we went, but it still feels like that's not enough.
Well, it's good that it wasn't just answer A, because if you have listened to and watched the podcast numerous times, you know that answer A is no longer good enough. It was good. It was amazingly enough, good enough 25 years ago when demonstrating these things was so difficult that you could raise money with the hand waving and the excitement about the category. And even the worst thing that I hate seeing in decks is look at the size of the total. It's $100 billion market. We just need 1%. So no one goes for that crap anymore.
Not
it
at
is.
all.
You are absolutely
Not
right.
at
It's all about traction. I'm surprised that actually having written commitments from all of these school districts isn't sufficient. How firm are these commitments?
They're these people are willing to sit down in the room with the investors and talk to them about the need and tell them why they're excited about it, and what they're willing to do with it. We've got, a great response from them. The data that we're putting together for these school districts, and just to give you a little bit more concept, because they're like, well, how are you going to make money? Obviously, we're a SaaS product that charges a subscription model. But right now, when I said perfect storm, is if a child gets held back, it costs the government or the state $7,000 roughly, depending on the state, roughly $7,000 a year. For $98.50 a year, we can make sure that you have every piece of data needed to get in front of that child's issues with reading and reading fluency before it ever comes to that. So the saving concept for the government should be a no-brainer in itself. The fact that we have these districts or charter schools, waiting for us to launch it and helping us pilot it, I felt like would be the ticket. For me, obviously, Marc, your network is your net worth. And I felt like without a warm introduction into investment lately, you kind of get overlooked.
Yeah, there's a number of things for us to unpack here. Everybody has heard those wonderful stories about, oh yeah, we submitted this script, 50 different agents and 50 different companies, and everyone rejected it. And then the 51st accepted it, and that became Usual Suspects, which I think is one of those classic stories. And we've all heard that. I pitched this 6,241 times, and the last one, they accepted it, and this became some huge success. Yeah. but I would never count on that. I'm bringing that story up because usually the simplest solution is the obvious one. And if you've gotten 20 or 30 investors who don't even want to engage with you in putting together some type of offer that might make sense to mitigate the risk, it's a very strong signal that you're right. Something is wrong. So, listen, I'm a very persistent guy, but I'm certainly not persistent to the point that I'm willing to keep pushing. What's that definition of insanity? It's trying the exact same thing over and over again and hoping for a different result.
I agree.
There's a couple things, and I'm getting ready for this one. So that one is that. The one piece is that let's take for a moment the argument that your proof isn't strong enough. That letter of intent is not enough.
Right.
And so part of me says that rather than pushing on investor after investor to accept what you have, is you should begin pushing on maybe school districts to give you what you need. And really what you need is a NRE deal, a non-refundable engineering deal, where basically in exchange for the right to use this software under some wonderful terms, they're putting the money up front. In other words, rather than so they're hedging their bets. And I would imagine this letter of intent isn't a binding purchase order that says, yes, if you deliver this on September 1st for the next 2023 school year, here's how much we're going to pay you. This is a contract. I doubt they've done that. But certainly if you want this money, the only thing better than money in the bank is a firm commitment that there'll be money in the bank. And so partly it may be how you're going to the school districts, and rather than having them raise, basically rather than you waving your answer A, rather than you waving your hands and saying, this is incredible, it solves a need, you've basically said, look at all the school districts willing to wave their hands and say what an amazing thing this is. But you may need to convert this even further.
No, that makes sense. You hit on a very interesting point. I've never thought about that at all. Very interesting.
Yeah, it's done reasonably. It's reasonably common when someone is solving a hard technical problem and there's someone who really wants that problem solved for their own business, and they're willing to put their money where their mouth is. And they're willing to enter into this contract that says we're willing to help fund the development of this product because it's so important to us. And we'll take some risk along with you because we've looked at the engineering, we've looked at the tech you're doing, we think it's pretty good. we think you can do this. So we'll put some money in now, which is non-refundable. It's what you're going to use to build the product. And in exchange, they're going to get a very sweet deal on the back end for using it. But I think you have a deeper problem here. And if you flash back now to earlier in our discussion, when I'm not sure whether I winced or whether I moaned or
you made it apparent.
How I chose to make apparent that there was something that bothered me, and it was the fact that you're selling to school districts. It's like, oh God, that is, with my apologies to school districts, the hardest category in the world to sell to. And Mark, he says that with understanding that people are going to come back and tell me how wrong that is. But it's brutal. And, I was on the board of an ed tech startup. So I had a chance to literally to see that one very much firsthand. But I've also been involved with a number of other companies who are in ed tech and had so many conversations that I just know it's an incredibly hard market to tech.
Yeah, it's a heavy lift. So we focused on private and charter schools because we don't have to ask for funding from the government or for them to put anything in. One of the things, though, that is in the public markets is they have this Etsy funding that they put together, which is to help kids catch up from COVID relief. So there is that. But I agree with you, Mark. Selling to the public markets is next to impossible. So that we are focusing on go-to-market strategy on private and charter schools just because they do have the funding available internally without having to get confirmation from a huge district.
So one thing I was going to suggest by basically dumping all over trying to sell to the schools is trying to find in the short term, because right now, this is not what your business model is going to be forever, but you have a short-term problem to solve, which is to demonstrate that your product is so good that someone's willing to pay for it.
Right.
And perhaps someone who's willing to pay for it at a 92% accuracy or an 89% accuracy. And I would begin shifting my sense and go, let's begin selling to someone right now, like today, who is willing to pay for this.
With that being said, can I ask a question around that, Mark?
Yeah, of course.
One of the things that's really interesting about what you're suggesting is that we're seeing a huge request for our downloads because we are piloting the product. We're seeing a huge request from countries like India, Singapore that are focused on ESL, or English as a second language. So we are seeing a huge request for downloads to be used as an English as a second language tool, which we wouldn't have to have those accuracy numbers at that position.
And well, yes, that's exactly where I'm going with this, is that when you have a product which is being built to meet NASA standards, you know what that costs.
Yep.
Where basically everything's got to be quadruple redundant. And so no, you start by building the technology and using it in applications where it's more fault tolerant, and begin getting it right and get the uses. I mean, a classic example of this is, again, stepping on a third rail here, but like look at Tesla's approach to fully autonomous driving.
Right.
I mean, anyone who's driven a Tesla know that is not even close to fully autonomous. But their principle is, if we put a system in place that begins racking up huge numbers of miles in an application where it does not need to be 100% accurate, it gives us a lead. And how that plays out or doesn't play out is unknown. But it's a point that you shift things around to application more fault tolerant so you can do it now. And you begin to say, well, if these guys aren't willing to commit because they need a certain level of accuracy or because they need a certain level of polish, then fine, let's sell it to someone who wants it now. And I'd argue it does not need to be in India or in Singapore, that there's tons of parents, there's tons of individual teachers, there's tons of people who probably would be willing to pay for this right now. And shifting it, again, does not need to be your long-term business model. But if you begin to get in a class 3 of the kids whose parents are springing for this, and they begin to see this, it's an incredible viral thing, which it spreads through the class. And then more importantly, Eventually, you have one class in a school doing it, and all of a sudden, the other third grade teachers see this. Now you have 6 third grades in the school. And then it spreads to a second school in the district. And pretty soon the district goes, why is everyone using this? In other words, they're not, it's not a distraction. It's not something which is a waste of time, but it solves a problem now, which let's just solve to the people who are willing to tolerate this because, listen, don't let perfection be the enemy of the good. And a lot of people are going to feel that way.
Yeah, no, for sure. And that's what I've been trying to wrap my head around.
So in other words, so yes, if you can sell to Singapore as an ESL, if you can sell to Singapore, India or Singapore, great, do that. But make it available here in the United States. And if parents are not interested, rather than going, oh, calling me back in a year and going, this is frustrated, how come they won't take that as a signal that maybe people don't want this as badly as you think? I mean, I think school districts is great, but they're really notoriously hard. Even in private schools, there's just not a lot of money in education. And there's certainly not a lot of extra money in education. And there's huge pressure on teacher salary because the school districts want, private schools alike, they want to put as much money as they can into certain areas. So anything they can do by cutting out technology, they will. I'm not saying you can't, and I'm not saying especially with the tailwinds you have that you won't be able to. But I'm saying start making money today and let this huge groundswell happen where everyone goes, oh my God, have you heard about this? And let that begin pulling. What'll happen is if you put this thing, okay, take one more run here. If you put this thing out countrywide, any student in the country can get it. So all of a sudden you are seated in hundreds, if not thousands of school districts, both, and by the way, we don't call them private, independent versus public schools. You're seated now. You have 1 or 2 seats, sometimes 5 seats in 1,000 different schools. What you're going to get is not the 20 schools that you've approached. You're going to get the ones who feel they have the biggest problem. You're going to find the ones with the most forward-thinking district superintendent. You're going to find the ones who are the most technology savvy, and they're going to raise their hands and they're going to come to you first. I mean, it's the reason that so many startups start by selling to venture-backed tech. And that's a terrible market because venture-backed tech goes out of business at a rate like 4 to 5 times more, if not 100 times faster than enterprise does. But in venture-backed tech, you generally have the CEO of the company who's very tech savvy making the decisions. And you can sell to them easily. And they want it and they're desperate for it. And they see it as a competitive advantage and it seeds it. And as soon as you can, you get the hell out of that market and get into enterprise. But that can be your approach. Find the people who want this, the individuals, use that as a seeding strategy to find the schools and the teachers and the districts that are willing to raise their hands and go, I'll do this. And do it fast. Well, I mean, my God, you are bootstrapping 19 employees?
Yeah. Well,
Jeez,
I've only been in America for 5 years. I've built 2 other businesses and sold them already in this time. So
Kyle, you're the American success story. Struggling immigrant comes from, well, maybe not Canada is what I'm thinking of. No, and makes good. This is awesome. I love what you're doing. You're taking your chops and you're going to applying it to something really, really helpful. It's really going to, improving literacy rates, holy mackerel, and doing it right here in the United States, fantastic. And it blows my mind that 54 million adults have so many reading problems. But start making some money at it so you don't go out of business and don't go broke doing this.
Yeah, it's a huge problem. And if we had more time, it really digests into how the economy works. Literacy, it really unfolds into the entire economy and how people interact. So it's really deeper than just being able to read. But you spark something. The wheels are turning now for sure. So.
That's my job. I am like the wheel turner, so I can get your head spinning. But it's if you. Listen, you're doing an amazing thing, and you don't need to go down the path of how good this is for society. But we're at the intersection of If you want what's good for society, use your personal fortune and fund it yourself and feel really, really good about that. And I'm serious. Or you go to nonprofits whose entire purpose is funding things which are good for society, but yet don't have a strong enough underpinning for the profit motive. But that's not, neither of those first two things what you asked my advice on. You said, no, I want to go down I want this to be a economically viable venture. And you're approaching people who, purpose schmurpus, let me see how my $2 million is going to turn into 20 or 200 million.
Right.
Because I did not go to my LPs, my limited partners, and say, I'm going to lose all your money, but just think how good it's going to feel.
How good you're going to feel about it.
Yeah, no, you said, I'm going to make you a shit ton of money. And I'm going to try and focus on the ed tech market so that we have a little bit of feeling good about it. But believe me, if you don't get the order of those operations, that's your test for the math side. If you don't get the order of operations right, you're sunk. So recognize that when you swim with the sharks, you got to do the right thing here. And that is, don't lament the fact that these crazy people don't see the value and they just want to see revenue. So for God's sake, go out there and show them revenue. And I cannot believe that if this thing is as valuable, that there aren't at least some of those, of the other 250 million, 300 million Americans who can read your paid advertising that says this is going to help their child succeed. This is going to keep their child from being left back. You're not going to start generating some revenue. And besides the fact that you'll have some revenue to show, as you know, the best way to improve the product is through flow, which is why you're doing the tests that you said, the betas that you're doing. Anyway, got me on a rant. I'm glad I got the wheels turning.
No, it's been good. It's been very educational.
That's my purpose. There will not be a quiz. You don't need to read anything. But I think it's really cool. And I'm a believer. So now make yourself viable so that you can have this one be a success so you can then solve an even bigger societal problem next.
I appreciate it, Mark.
So Kyle, here's the deal. There's not going to be a quiz, but I do need you to stop back in later at some point and let me know.
I'd love to.
And at some point, I'd love to shoot you an invite to join our That Will Never Work community, which is all entrepreneurs helping other entrepreneurs. Because I think, you could help a lot of people, but I think you might find some people there who could help you out as well.
I'm always willing to learn. So,
well, sounds good, Kyle. Good luck, and we'll talk later.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Well, I hope both Kyle and you got some actionable tips on how to reach your funding goals. There's a real need for something to address literacy. So I hope this company can actually make a real impact. But if you would like to be a guest on That Will Never Work, join my mailing list, or receive an invite to our Discord community, simply come to markrandolph.com. Or if you're feeling social, follow me on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, or even TikTok. And did you know there's a podcast of this show? So if you'd like to listen on the go, you can pick one up wherever you get your podcasts.